Hello and welcome back to the Football Hipsters podcast. My name is Kris. I am your host, of course. And as promised, we are back after the first set of games to have a little chinwag about what we've seen and what we expect from round two. Now, slight disclaimer, dear listener, fully aware that at the time of recording this game, there has already been one game played in the second stage. And in fact, I think there's another game underway. So we're just going to pretend those haven't happened, all right? So we're going to go over the first few games first of all, and we'll meet in the middle. I've got Josh and I've got Tom with me to break down the first group games action. How are you doing, guys?
Howdy.
Yeah, good, thank you, mate. How you doing?
Good. Very hot, and hastily raced home to complete this podcast. So hopefully our listeners enjoy it. If they don't, then, well, there's nothing I can do about it. Right, let's jump in then, guys. We've got quite a lot to discuss. So we'll start with the opening game. We had the opening ceremony, of course, and then we had Bocelli and all that wonderful jazz. Well, it wasn't actually jazz, was it? And then we arrived at Turkey 0, Italy 3, and that was, of course, in Group A. And the following day, we saw Wales and Switzerland draw 1 apiece. Josh, start with you on this one in Group A. What did the first games tell us about these four sides? Turkey, the underdogs for the tournament, everyone said. They got spanked, and Wales and Switzerland served up a bit of a stinker, would it be fair to say?
Yeah, I think certainly on Turkey, I think a couple of us had mentioned them as dark horses, ones to look out for, but they certainly disappointed for us. I say all credit to this Italy side, though. It's a side that I think will be going, they're in that kind of between tournament favourites and dark horses, that kind of in-between zone. I think that's where Italy are. I think they'd be disappointed if they don't make the semis. And for that kind of reason, you can't really put them down as a dark horse, but they looked superb. Some of the football they were playing, this wasn't a Italian side that meets all the stereotypes of old, where you'd expect, the Bonucci, Barzagli, Chiellini back three with Buffon behind them, and they're going, right, we're 1-0 up, see you later. This was a side that went for the jugular, and to be honest, I can't wait to see them play again, which I believe is this evening against Switzerland at time of recording. So yeah, they're a team that I'm really looking forward to seeing. Turkey, I'd say less about them. I would say kind of avoid that one. Wales and Switzerland, that was very much it was an interesting game for watching it. I'm sure that's how you kind of say that it was not very good, to say it's an interesting watch instead. But I thought there was some real passion from Wales. It was Switzerland had their chances to kind of finish off, but Wales kind of showed the spirit that we saw at the previous Euros, where they managed to get so far in the tournament, that got them through again for this one with Kiefer Moore bringing an equaliser in. And I think both sides will be disappointed, to be honest. Wales will be disappointed to concede with Embolo, who I thought was superb through the whole game. But Switzerland also really shouldn't have conceded so easily and shouldn't have been under so much pressure. As I say, it was a very kind of neutral game to hit the Swiss stereotype.
I think like you said, that is the stereotype of Switzerland, isn't it? Like the defensive kind of not exactly exciting style. They threatened to blow Wales away in that particular game, but it ended up not happening. And I think as far as the Welsh go, I think they do need a result from their next game, which, as you say, is sort of underway as we speak. No spoilers. Tom, I just want to, before we move to the next group, I just want to get your thoughts on Italy, because they're one of the teams that I think we all agree that Turkey very much disappointed. But Italy, they showed up, didn't they? I think it's the first time they scored 3 goals in a group game in the Euros. Is it ever?
Yeah, ever. Yeah, I heard that stat as well. Wow. Yeah, no, they impressed me, to be honest. I hadn't seen much of them in the build-up to the game until my mate told me that I think it was they've conceded 7 goals and scored 75 in their last 27 games and haven't lost a single one of them. So before that went off, I was really eager to have a look and see how that was the case. And then, to be fair to them, as much as Turkey weren't great, Italy they can only do with they can only really do what they've got in front of them, and they kind of pick them apart left, right, and centre. They dominated the game for large parts of it. And like you mentioned, they have a tendency sometimes to sit back, play very rigid, but it was very much an open style, flowing Italian side, which I haven't personally been very used to seeing, but it was really refreshing to watch those players come together. Insigne had a really good game. Obviously, he's got to be playing well if he's keeping, is it Chiesa from on the bench? He's had a really, really good season himself. So I was surprised not to see him in the starting lineup, but when I saw how him and Immobile were playing together in that fixture, it just looked, very. Mancini's definitely got a really good team together, and they definitely seem to buy into his approach, the style of play that they're playing. Everyone seems to be on the same page, and it's shown in that first game there.
Yeah, agree. Good points. And Spinazzola was the other one that stood out, probably unexpectedly, I think, to most, because I don't think he was particularly fancy to play most of the games. But I thought he was excellent. And Italy are certainly one of those clubs to probably keep a close eye on, or countries, I should say, not clubs. And they play, as Josh said, again tonight against Switzerland. So we'll see what the follow-up is. Let's move on to the next group. On Saturday, the 12th of June, we saw the afternoon game we'll come on to in a second for obvious reasons, but I do want to talk Belgium 3, Russia 0 first of all. Josh, Belgium, I kind of tipped them as one of the outside, behind France for me as one of the teams to watch. They blew Russia away. How much of this was how good Belgium were, and how much of it was how bad Russia were? Because Russia was pretty terrible, weren't they?
I would say 6 of one and half a dozen of the other. Having just watched Finland play Russia, I'll leave that result to the next pod. I don't want to jump the gun on that one, but let's just say, this Russia side is not very good at all. No. Lukaku was in his absolute element here. This was, to trawl again and a kind of stereotype. This was Lukaku up against a poor side, smashing them 2 or 3 goals. He was just absolutely phenomenal. Phenomenal. I can't even say the word now. Phenomenal. Anyway, he was really good. Yes. I think everything that was good about Belgium was him. A bit of a nasty injury for Castagna, whose tournament is now over. Meunier came on and got it. It's a fractured cheekbone.
Another one
from memory. Yeah, absolutely. And also Shirkov as well picked up an injury, and that's his tournament over. But I think at his age, I think that kind of injury is almost like straight to the glue factory, young man. In footballing terms, however minor the knock he may end up with, but. I thought Belgium was superb, and I don't think they really got out of first gear to really brush aside Russia. And I don't think with anybody in the group, to be honest, they will be wholly worried with anyone there. Such was their performance. But I suppose we want to move on to the biggest talking point for all good reasons and bad reasons as well. That's the other game that took place earlier and later than the Belgium-Russia game.
Yes, absolutely, and I'll definitely get both of your thoughts on this. Tom, I'll start with you. I don't know if you were watching this game live, but I mean, let's not pretend nobody knows what happened in this game. I'm pretty sure everybody, whether you're a football fan or not, would know that we were watching Denmark against Finland. It was about 5 minutes before half-time. I'll be completely honest, I didn't even see the incident happen, and I almost feel bad admitting this on air, but I actually had to rewind the live coverage because all I could sort of determine was that a player was injured, and I assumed it was like quote unquote a bad injury. Little did I know that obviously Christian Eriksen had suffered a cardiac arrest on the pitch. Having sort of rewound the footage and just seen him fall to the ground, that was bad enough. But then the global coverage continued. I don't think I'm exaggerating when I say that seeing a player receiving CPR live on a television broadcast is one of the most harrowing things I've ever seen on television in a live broadcasting session, certainly in sport. And I've witnessed the Eduardo leg break, the Abu Dhabi leg break, the Aaron Ramsey leg break, but this just felt just completely visceral. What was your reaction to it when it happened in front of your eyes?
Yeah, so like I assume a lot of people, I wasn't actually watching the game at the time. It only came through a message of a mate that he was saying like Christian Eriksen's collapsed, and he's been down for 5-6 minutes. I then went home, switched the telly on, and I was kind of watching it all unfold because it unfolded. It was maybe over the space of maybe 10 to 15 minutes. This was going on the pitch. So I didn't see the initial fall, but I watched everything pretty much afterwards. And like you mentioned about seeing everything on the camera, I know there was a huge outroar for people wanting the heads of the production team that were covering it, because he was on the floor. Obviously, his teammates, you saw the circle around him, and they had like the white sheets as well, which actually, from what I was told, were actually Finland fan flags. That they threw to them to allow them to have some sort of privacy. Because when I went over and I watched the clips, he collapsed, and then they were starting the production team was zooming in on him when he was on the floor. And obviously it was one of those falls, when you see it back, it's really uncomfortable to watch. Like, it's really not one of those. I mean, I've seen a lot of bad tackles with players that have leg breaks, but this thing kind of, it hits different when you see it. It's a really I can't really put a word together for it. But it's just uncomfortable to watch. Like, his legs give way, hits the floor, and he literally just doesn't budge. Like, nothing moves. His teammate Simon Kjær as well. I know he got a lot of love, rightfully so, for his response. And is it Anthony Taylor, the referee, as well, which I believe it was his first major Euro game as well. So a big shout out to him as well for being as responsive as he did, because I think it was less than 5 seconds before he blew that whistle, and then everyone was coming over, because it's such a random event that you're never going to really see for a considerable amount of time. I think it happened with Fabrice Muamba quite a while ago.
Mark Finian as well.
Yeah, so that awareness kind of came to the front again, and it's come forward with this event. But it was so weird. Like, I had a huge amount of like anxiety, and I felt when they released the news that he was okay, I can't remember the last time I felt that much relief, because it was mortifying seeing that with a guy who obviously plays football and loves it. He's fit as anything, and then to suddenly hit the floor, and next thing you know, he's fighting for his life is just mind-boggling. And seeing the scenes again, like where they panned over to his wife or his wife or his girlfriend, who was in absolute hysterics. Again, I think it was a bit poor showing, really. It was a very private moment, really, that it should have been. If it was anything else, I saw a tweet on Twitter about if it's a streaker or if it's something to do with foul language, that production team pans out straight away and has nothing to do with it. But for some bizarre reason with this one, it seemed to have a spotlight shone on it for large parts. But I'm just incredibly relieved that he's okay. Obviously, I don't want to get too far ahead and think that he's perfectly fine. I believe he's still undergoing tests, and they're just making sure that everything's all good with him. But yeah, the relief that I felt after that moment, I can't explain. It was because it was such a horrific thing to even just to watch on telly. So I can't imagine what his friends and family and teammates were thinking at all.
No, I think that's very well said. And Josh, what was your sort of thoughts on it? And also, if you want to just touch on your views in terms of what should have happened, because I think you're on the same lines as me. You know, that UEFA have not come out smelling of roses after all. I think Kasper Schmeichel's come out and said that they were given 2 options, neither of which were acceptable. And there's a 48-hour rule in place for coronavirus infection rates. But if a player has a cardiac arrest, you're expected to play the game within 40 hours. It makes 0 sense.
Yeah, I think I completely echo everything Tom said. I was fortunate or unfortunate enough to be watching live at that point. And yeah, it's something that, as we've mentioned with the production team, I think that certainly local production teams weren't broadcasting that game. So I think BBC had it in the UK. It wasn't their camera crew. It was a stream from UEFA. I think there are some things personally I think they could have done. But then also, are you going to push it straight back to a studio team? What are a studio team going to be doing? They're going to be watching that, and you're going to be watching people react to it. And I think that's just as bad, watching, I suppose, Gary Lineker, I think it was Micah Richards, and I can't remember the third pundit. I want to say it was Eni Aluko, or was it Alex Scott?
Yeah, who was visibly distressed by it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, shining, switching the cameras from that to watching 3 people reacting to it is, just as bad. And so can completely understand why they didn't bring it straight to the studio. But, as Tom has already highlighted, that there's something the director could do in terms of moving to a camera that's in just a vacant position, or you move to a helicopter shot. There's plenty of other things that could have happened in that time whilst it was going on. But in terms of, as you alluded to, I think it was Peter Schmeichel on UK breakfast television that first hinted at the options that were given. I wasn't that sure that it was right initially, before this had even come out, that the game continued in the evening. A bit like the concussion protocol. You don't ask exactly. You don't ask the player that's just been knocked unconscious if he's ready to play on. You take that position out of his hands, and I think again, this should have been a decision taken out of the players' hands. They said that the two choices they were given was, after it was they were given the okay that Christian Eriksen had regained consciousness and was in being looked after, that their two options were, we'll play the game this evening, we'll finish the game this evening, or we will finish the game on Sunday. And the players' responses were, from what we're told from reports, were, well, we won't sleep tonight from what we've seen. So the best of the bad options we've been given is we play the game this evening. Play the game this evening. At that point, which should be stated as well, the game was at 0-0.
Yeah.
Nobody had an advantage at that point in the game, other than would say Denmark they looked fantastic at that point. Finland were really kind of holding on. There were a couple of opportunities where they should have arguably have scored against Finland, and were definitely the dominating team. But I don't think anybody would have begrudged, even the fans that were in the stadium, getting them to sit on and see what they've just witnessed as well. There'll be like counselling in place for the players for what they've seen. They have team psychologists now, a lot of them. I don't know what anybody, especially the fans, that were front and centre, from anybody who's taken a first aid course, that you realise how harrowing CPR actually is. I don't want to go into any details because you don't know what time people are listening to this and how levels of squeamishness, but just say CPR isn't a pretty thing. No. So to have witnessed that as well, I think there's got to be something in place for those fans, and for the two options to be, well, he's all right, and your options, we're giving you an option, but fundamentally what we're saying is you're playing this game.
Yeah,
this game is continuing. The thing you've got a choice to is how you say yes to continuing the game, and that isn't a decision really for them to make. Arguably, I think we're all sitting here as neutrals saying that game should have been a 0-0. That's it. The fact that there's rumours, I don't know how substantial, so I will say they are rumours, that if Denmark had said they didn't want to continue playing the game, they would have been given a 3-0 loss.
Yeah,
I think that just, and especially as only 2 months ago, there was a big PR thing for UEFA being victims of the dastardly, 16 clubs or so, for even daring to build a Super League and move away from UEFA's governments. That's done all of that work from certainly outlets in the UK. I remember Sky and BT running huge campaigns on how it would be awful for them. Not a single word from them condemning this act or these options that they've been given of how you would basically replay this game. When arguably you have someone there with, I know this is asking a lot in UEFA, someone with a heart and someone with a brain to say fundamentally, no, for the welfare of the players, no way. Especially as the season we've just come off the back of as well, and this tournament that some would be saying why is it even happening? Because of the season that we've just witnessed, in terms of how many games have been in this season, how close they've been, the lack of rest for these players, and for a person or a player with no prior medical issues regarding his heart to have a cardiac arrest.
Yeah.
And for them to go, I just think there needs to be some kind of inquiry into it. And I would love to see somebody prominent in the media just to be pushing it, and it's just not something we're seeing. And for me, that is one of the things that has to come out of it. A bit like with Fabrice Muamba, when we saw that, there was then a big campaign to get defibrillators in, even at local level. You can go into the tiniest Sunday league club, there'll be a defibrillator on that pitch somewhere.
Yeah,
they will have one because of what's happened in there. And that's one of the big things that I think needs to come out for this as well, is just player welfare. And we saw Lukaku had given in his celebration a big shout out to Christian Eriksen as well, after seeing that, and him saying that even he wasn't necessarily fully prepared to be going into playing Belgium-Russia, and he only witnessed it on the TV.
Yeah,
he wasn't there like the 21 other players on the pitch. And for me, I think there's just a wider sense of something else needs to be done there, because it was absolutely farcical. And I can't believe UEFA even contemplated that they should be restarting this game. And I think everybody, even say for Finland, this is the first tournament they've ever qualified for, and it's their first win.
Yeah, and
we're not talking about it. We're not talking about it at all. And there should be some credit for them. Once the game restarted, they took their goal well. They were fortunate. The Højbjerg missed a penalty as well, I think on the 69th minute. There was a chance for that to go through, but it just all seemed rather immaterial in the end. And you've got to feel sorry a little bit for the Finnish fans that it is just like their biggest moment in their footballing history at the moment is just not seen at all.
I think between you've all perfectly nailed it. And I think the one thing that we will all agree on is it's just fantastic news that he's doing well. And as Tom touched on, there's no guarantee that he'll have a future in terms of in the game. You would imagine probably not, but people like, I think it's Daley Blind has had similar problems, and he's still a professional. So I think it just brings it home. It's scary when somebody who is, as Tom said, like so fit and healthy can just drop like that. And it was just, I mean, to think that we've witnessed 3 in our lifetimes, or certainly my lifetime. I think you 3 of them may be the same. I don't know, Tom, you might be a bit young for Vivian Foe, but I mean, it's for me, it's 3 too many times. And
it definitely. Sorry, Chris. I was going to say it definitely seems to kind of bring back the humanization of footballers. I definitely think with all the money in the game, as it floats about, I know you've mentioned it on previous pods, footballers get treated like machines. Obviously, the more you pay them, well, the more games they got to play because they're getting paid. So they can do these kind of things. And this definitely, for a lot of people, I think has brought everything back down to earth to show kind of how the expectations on footballers at the end of the day, they're still human beings as much as the rest of us. They just earn a lot more money, but it doesn't make them any more or less of a human than we are.
No.
So the fact that it took away everything from football, and it just became a case of wanting to see a bloke go back to his wife and see his kids grow up. It stripped everything away. And I don't know if it was just because of the order that I saw stuff in, but it almost seemed when it first came out that he was okay, it almost seemed like some parts of the media were pushing this narrative of, Christian's rang the team and he said, yeah, guys, go out there and get the win, and made it this all happy-go-lucky kind of approach. And then I think it was the manager that came out after the game and said, well, we didn't even have a choice. And then as soon as that came out, everyone was just, especially myself, was absolutely livid, because I almost bought into that side of, Christian said go for it. So, the players might feel a bit more inclined to do it, even as difficult as it is, but then to find out that they're cornered and they've got to pick between the lesser of two evils, whether it's today or tomorrow, was just farcical for me.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And there's a wider subject matter for those in the game to look at player welfare and just how many games they're being put through. And as much as I'm enjoying watching these Euros, I remember saying a year ago this tournament had no business taking place, and I stand by that. But anyway, it has taken place, or is taking place, and we will move on to the next day's action, which saw England-Croatia, which ended in a 1-0 win for England. On the same day, we saw Group C get underway with Austria 3, North Macedonia 1. More on that one in a moment. And Netherlands 3, Ukraine 2, which was a bit of a thriller. In the interest of time, I'm only going to give one of you the opportunity of England. So, Josh, you get the short straw on this one. I as much as England sort of got the win here, I didn't think it was a mind-blowing, impressive performance. And again, I think there was a touch of how bad Croatia were, but at the same time, England, they deserved the win. Let's be honest. And let's just put it this way: I'm not convinced it's quote coming home at this point. I'm loving those memes, honest. But what did you make of the performance and indeed the lineup? Because that caused a few ruptions as well before the game.
Yeah, definitely. It was the lineup that you kind of hadn't hoped for, but you knew was inevitable in terms of fairly conservative and at least two right backs on the field in terms of Trippier and Kyle Walker starting. It was a very interesting game from an England perspective. I think generally it was quite conservative. There is now a new hero on every England fan's lips in terms of Calvin Phillips, because I think he's really shown himself of what he can do outside of a very specific system that he is asked to play in with Bielsa, asked to kind of be more of a box-to-box player fundamentally, and he was absolutely superb, I thought, in the game. Still an absolute worry on why Harry Kane is still picked for England, but obviously there is some bias from my club allegiances, we say, on why potentially I don't think Harry Kane should be in the starting lineup for England. But once he came off and Calvert-Lewin came on, there was certainly a change in impetus. And I think generally Sterling looked great. All the players that you basically had written off pre-tournament proved everybody wrong, other than Kane. We'll add quickly to that. And I think it's going to be very interesting how it gets rotated with Scotland coming up as well on Friday night. I think there will be a change in tact, maybe a bit more open, a bit more attacking, because there were some key names missing out as well in terms of Jadon Sancho and Ben Chilwell weren't in the matchday squad.
Yeah.
But overall, I think from the English point of view, we'll take the 1-0 against Croatia. It probably means now, on paper, we top the group. So any thoughts of let's try and be smart and avoid, the second place team from Group F is now out of the window, but it's inevitable that we will probably pick up one of those sides. And so be it. Just got to kind of move on to it. But yeah, I will move swiftly on so you can grab the rest of the games in that evening, which are Group C.
Yes, indeed. And it's time I'm going to for those. I guess the two big stories, Tom, in these particular games was Marko Arnautovic was rather angry, and then that turned into something a little bit more unpleasant, allegedly. But it's okay because he's got friends in country, so that makes it fine. That's all good. But yes, a good performance from Austria in one of those games that I looked at and I went, yeah, I'm going to give that one a miss. It won't be much cop. And it turned out to be very, very good. The opening goal in particular was fantastic. And then I think the other thing that day taught us was that the Netherlands/Holland, whichever you prefer, I guess the Netherlands is the correct term, they're going to be a lot of fun, but they are also going to come a cropper. You know that if they play a good team and they play like they did against Ukraine, they're going to get spanked, by a big score. But they showed resilience to come from having been 2-0 up, concede a wonder goal from Yarmolenko, 2-2 from the header for Ukraine, but they still went on to win it from Denzel Dumfries, great name. What was your kind of takeaway from those two games? Do you fancy Austria and the Netherlands as the two that are going to progress from this group, given those results?
Yeah, I think so. I think that Austria side, I think a lot of people can underestimate. They do have some good players in that team. Obviously, we know how hit and miss Arnautovic can be, but on his day, he can be a really difficult player to deal with. Obviously, they've got the likes of Sabitzer as well. Really good player. We've seen him tear apart a few teams in the Champions League. Alaba, another big name as well for them. So they have got standout players that can hurt teams, and I think that's why they've managed to kind of put North Macedonia to the sword. Obviously, the rather fortunate goal for Pandev, as he still keeps trotting on at the ripe old age of, I think, was it around 37, 38 or something that man is? I think he's going to keep going over the age of 40. I think he loves his country so much.
Nuts, isn't it?
But yeah, no, I think Netherlands, again, it was I think, like I mentioned on the one before, you don't really know what you're going to get with them sometimes. They can have phases of play like they did against Ukraine where they seem very comfortable, and then next thing you know, they let two really easy goals go in, and then they're on the back foot, and you think, oh, hang on a minute, they might actually lose this game. So I think it's just that consistency, like you mentioned. If they come up against a top side who are solid and can also damage you, then I think they might end up conceding 3 or 4 against some of these big teams if they're not careful. I know they play quite a fluid system, but it's almost, I think a lot of people use the term fluid to cover up very poor defensive moments in games. And I don't know, after seeing that performance, they're going to have to do a lot more in the next game to convince me that they'll probably go past the semis for this one, because I think, as you mentioned, if they come up against a good team, I think they'll struggle, to be honest. But they came away with the win, and that's the main thing, I suppose, for the tournament football. It doesn't matter how you do it, as long as you get it done. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see how their next few games pan out in the group, especially.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And don't get it wrong, the Netherlands game was very fun, and not for a minute playing down the fun element. It was just a little bit chaotic for me.
For a neutral, it was brilliant. I loved watching that game.
Yeah, it's great fun. And Wout Weghorst with his he enjoyed his goal. I think it's his first in Dutch colours, major tournament and all that. So he enjoyed that moment. And the Yarmolenko's goal certainly was the highlight of that. But Ukraine, another one of the teams that people sort of said might be a dark horse. So far, haven't shown up, but we shall see what happens next. Josh, on to Monday's games then, which was 2 days ago. We saw at Hampden Park in Glasgow probably one of the goals of the Euros thus far, if not ever, in Patrick Schick's absolute rocket buster from almost inside his own half to wrap the points up against Scotland. It was his 2 goals. And we also saw Poland and Slovakia play out a game. We'll come on to Spain, Sweden in a second, but just looking at those 2 games first of all. So obviously Scotland, Czech Republic was in the England group. Good result for England and for Croatia, arguably, because you sort of feel like England and Croatia are the 2 teams that are expected to go through, and seeing Scotland drop points, I mean, the pressure's on them at Wembley now, isn't it, tomorrow night?
Yeah, definitely. I think generally looking at the side, the Czech side as well, Scotland had their chances against the nil on their side. They were very much Scotland and Hove Albion on the XG front. I think they had an XG of over 2, whilst Czech Republic, obviously, for any stats people out there, the XG of Patrick Schick's goal, the second one, very low indeed. I think generally you'll kind of look at it from an England perspective. I still fear Scotland more than I fear the Czech Republic. But that might just be the added spice of a home nation.
Derby,
Derby in that regard. But I can say, generally with that game, Yarmolenko was in bed the night before thinking, well, I've got goal of the tournament, probably one of my contenders in there. I'll at least be in the conversation. And then Patrick Schick, only a few hours later, does that for Scotland. Then Poland and Slovakia. an interesting game. I didn't catch a lot of it, to be honest, in general. I know you certainly watched it, Kris. But seeing Wojciech Szczesny do what Wojciech Szczesny can do, should we say, moment from his Arsenal days. And I think, this Polish side, they don't create as well as, say, Bayern Munich for Lewandowski, should we say. Yeah. But I don't know if you want to talk through that game a bit more, because as you say, I didn't watch a huge amount of it.
To be honest, not massively, but I do just want to give Slovakia a lot of credit, because I think they were very much the less fancied team in this game, and the winner from Milan Skriniar of Inter Milan was a thing of beauty. I mean, the control on the volley, or sort of half volley, to put it away was a goal worthy of winning any game. So fair play to him as a defender. So yeah, no offense to our Slovakian listeners, of which there probably are none, but you never know. But I'm gonna skip ahead to a game that's probably a bit more dull. So I apologise, Tom, but we're gonna. Don't worry, dear listeners. Joel hasn't run away. He hasn't escaped forever. We will drag him on at some point, but in his absence, Tom, I'm going to give you Spain, Sweden. It was 0-0. I personally, as a sort of a bit of a Sweden follower, as well as France, I kind of enjoyed this for a couple of reasons. A, because Sweden basically shithoused their way to a 0-0 draw. And also the fact Alexander Isak showed up. Okay, he didn't get his goal, but I think he gave glimpses of the player that I think he's going to be. He looks a real talent. But the story here kind of is Spain, isn't it? I mean, 954,000 passes in 10 minutes in the first half. I think they ended on 6,020,000 in the end, which was lovely. But there's no end product, is there? And Alvaro Morata, I mean, penny for his thoughts, because he went full Chelsea Torres, didn't he, that particular game?
Yeah, no, when you look over the game, they had quite a few chances to bag one. Spain, you mentioned the endless passing that they do to break teams down, but at the end of the day, if you don't put the ball in the back of the net, nothing's going to come from it. And like I mentioned in the previous pod, I think they're relying on goals from elsewhere apart from their striker, which is the main issue for them at the moment. Because Morata, for some reason, whenever I watch him play for Spain, like you mentioned, he's just the Torres of Chelsea. He just can't put the ball in the back of the net, no matter how hard he tries. He always seems to struggle to get that momentum going, and I think a couple of chances fell to Koke in the game, but it's a bit worrying for them in terms of where are the goals going to come, because if they're going to look convincing in this tournament and build up some momentum, as good a side as Sweden can be, they should realistically be taking that one. And they did have a few chances, I mentioned, but it wasn't a performance where you think, oh right, okay, yeah, Spain are here to go all the way. It looks as though they're going to, on the back of that performance, they're going to struggle. But like you mentioned about Sweden, that was my first time seeing Isak play. And I've heard a lot of big things about him, but I'm very dulled down when it comes to hype around players. I know they can get hyped up very easily seeing it with English players. But he does look very, very good, to be fair to him. He's got very, very quick feet, seems very athletic as well. And he's just got, I don't know, he's got that X factor about him, it seems. I know he had a couple of chances, nothing too clear cut. It doesn't help the fact that he's playing in a team that, like you mentioned, it's just they were just trying to get that game over the line and come out with it with damage limitation on the end of it. But he definitely looks like someone who, if he has a couple of good performances in this tournament, a lot of teams, I mean, even now after the season you mentioned he's had in La Liga, might start sniffing around him. So it'll be interesting to see how they pan out in their next game, Sweden, and if he manages to kind of bring himself to the forefront of that team. Because apart from maybe Emil Forsberg, I wouldn't look at that team and go, it's riddled with attacking prowess and talent. But yeah, if he can come through, it'll be hopefully another one of those wonder stories where somebody has a good Euros and then they can kickstart their career from it. But yeah, I think the main talking point, as you mentioned, is just how blunt Spain looked, to be honest. Sideways, backwards, 70% of the ball is all well and good, but if you don't put the ball in the net, then there's no real point to it.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, the pretty patterns are fantastic, but if you don't put the ball away, then ultimately nobody remembers second place, I guess. And Spain very much have got it all to do in terms of that group, particularly given the fact that Slovakia have got off and running and Poland continue to disappoint. You feel that if there's a winner in either of the next two games between those four sides, then they're probably likely to be through. So interesting to see what happens there. Josh, that brings us to the final group, which is Group F. We saw the first two games of that group last night. The so-called Group of Death, the one that everyone's been waiting for. You get the pleasure of Portugal-Hungary. What was your thoughts on this? Because I must admit, I didn't see this live. I was at work at the time, but having watched the highlights back, it was kind of the tale of the last 10 minutes, wasn't it? Hungary with their home fans, full support. They battled well, but didn't really have missed a couple of good chances, in fact, just didn't have the end product. And then Ronaldo happened and Guerrero happened, and that was it. 3-0 Portugal. And the scoreline, is it fair to say, flatters them a bit? 'Cause, I mean, they did dominate the game, but I just don't know if they were 3-0 worthy of it, really.
Oh, I would say, yeah, having watched a large majority of the game, it was, if anybody knows my luck, you'll know I missed the last 10 minutes of the game, where everything happened. But generally, from what I saw in it, it was similar to Spain-Sweden, but there was actually a clinical finisher available to the dominant side. Portugal, I think, between them and Italy, will be the two big sides that play probably the best football against a side that will be open, basically, for them. Someone that's not going to completely block them up. I think I'm absolutely surprised if Diogo Jota made it out of the stadium alive, based on his early chance, which he should have in thrown back to the World Cup Harry Kane levels, not passing to Sterling in the semi-final levels of having a man completely free. And it would have been 1-0 within, the opening 20 minutes. I think that's one of the bigger issues, I'd say, generally, with it. But, that's kind of early tournament things. When Ronaldo was then given the opportunity, some may say, oh, he's now such just, penalty merchant, which is, yes, how he got one of his goals. But that second goal from him was just, it shows you what Ronaldo has now become. He is that kind of striker rather than a kind of a winger in terms of getting up and down the field, but he's still got that great close control. And yeah, his second goal was absolutely wonderful for them. I think generally it was going to be one of those that as soon as the first goal went in, you knew Hungary were going to collapse. I think if it was 1-0 after 20 minutes, Portugal could have come out of this with a 3-0 easily, just by that one as well, and probably cruised to that rather than making it look a little bit more difficult than it actually was. Because I think fundamentally, Portugal kept attacking, and I think that was the difference between. It was interesting that the games were basically back-to-back, the Spain and Portugal games, and you could see just that difference of having people that want to get into the box and moving around, because arguably Portugal didn't have a striker either. Jota was the player that was starting up top for them, with Ronaldo, nominally and nonchalantly ignoring all of the fixtures, formation diagrams, and just kind of sitting up top somewhere and getting in when he wanted to. But yeah, I think they look to me, I think I had them as real ones to watch as actual winners of this tournament. And I think we'll get to France, Germany as well, and you can take over from there. But I'd certainly have France got through that game. We'll say that. Yeah, and I'll pass to you to talk about that game.
Yeah, and I'll bring Tom in to wrap us up on that game, because I felt going into this game, Tom, that it was going to be, when you saw that Portugal had won the game earlier on in the day, you looked at this game and for me it felt even more important, because if these two sides had drawn, it wouldn't really have made too much of an impact. But when you see that France won the game 1-0, Germany now sit with 0 points, and two, arguably the two more informed teams in the group of now sitting on 3, it puts a lot of pressure on Germany's next game. As for the performance, I mean, I've seen a lot of people, I'll try and be unbiased here, a lot of people who haven't watched France under Deschamps sort of said, oh, it was boring, they were defensive, they just dropped back and blah, blah. This is France. This is what they do. And I think the clean sheet sort of ratio is very underrated. The goal was fortuitous, but let's not forget 2 goals disallowed for offside, very late offsides, I might suggest. And I never really felt like France were ever really under a great degree of pressure from Germany, who they just disappointed me. Like, they just didn't seem to have any, like Spain, any end product. Did you see it that way, or did you feel that they were a bit unlucky in this game?
No, I definitely think that Germany side came into that game with the thought of being a bit pragmatic and potentially pinching a goal and then holding out to a 1-0. I think the reason France didn't maybe open up as much as they'd want to is because historically, like Germany, you give them one chance, they can bag it. So they seem to be quite careful with how they deployed, how on the pitch they were committing bodies forward. Obviously, it helps the fact that you can have the lone road runner up top and he can produce a bit of magic for you, which at times, I know the goal that got disallowed. Obviously, when I saw Hummels was at the back for that game, I was very worried for him. But it just, I think if you're a fan of France, you look at that and you take it. It's one of those games where you can easily slip up on it. You mentioned there could have been a couple more for France. I don't think it was a performance where people should look at it and go, "Oh, they're not as good as people say they are," because I don't think they even came out of second gear, to be honest. I think if that France team wants to go forward, play creative and go attacking, you'll notice it. I think they played a lot more pragmatic in that game, knowing that if Germany showed up, they could hurt them. So I think they played the smart move, to be honest. And in tournament football, that's the thing that wins you the silverware at the end of it. It's not as much as you can play beautiful open football. One goal can come back to bite you. And like you mentioned with Germany now, they're in a position where they look at their next games and they're like, "Oh God, right, okay, we need to put our finger out now, because if they don't get something from the next one, it's looking a bit bleak for them." So I think France will look at that and be like, "Sound, we got our 3 points, onto the next one." I don't think they'll be overthinking it, being like, "Oh, we didn't perform as well as we could have." I think when you come up against big sides that can potentially hurt you, you take the 3 points and you clear your head and go on to the next one again.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I think ultimately the result is what will get sort of the attention in France. And Josh, to round us off on that one, what's your sort of opinion on the France performance? Because for me, Pogba was outstanding and just goes to show what a pleasure he is to watch when he's on his game, and he certainly was last night. And the work rate of the front three was very interesting. Mbappe and Griezmann in particular chasing back and helping out the defence, whilst Benzema was looking to feed Mbappe and receive from Mbappe. It was very much a good 1-2 sort of scenario they had set up. But as Tom said, I just felt they played in second gear and they didn't need to come out of second gear. And I think there's a lot more to come from this French squad. Maybe the game with Portugal is the key one now.
Yeah, I did wonder. Again, that kind of Portugal game, that's the last game of the group. It's France-Portugal. Potentially both teams are sitting on 6 points at that point, and they could play out quite a drab 0-0, to just look after themselves. But yeah, for me, I'm completely aware of how France play under Deschamps. It's not necessarily the prettiest. It's quite almost like the water boy. They very much play like the manager used to. But I did think it was a little disappointing because taking away from the offsides, if we couldn't take those out of isolation, I didn't think France created enough based on the talent that was available to them. This seems like more of a team that is not as great as the sum of their parts, but is still good enough for you to win a tournament.
Yeah.
I think that's where I kind of sit with this French team. But it will just drive through it. It works for them. If, they didn't get the goal from Hummels, the own goal, do I think they probably would have tried for a win out of there? I'm not too sure, to be honest. It looked very, both teams looked very blunt in attack for me, under two different ways of playing. Germany were very happy to have possession, and France were very happy to cede possession. Like Tom's already mentioned, you've got Mbappe on the field. He's going to, bring a team up 40, 50 yards within a blink of an eye.
Pace is a threat.
Exactly.
You can't sit high. Yeah, exactly.
No, exactly. So the fact that he was ceding possession wasn't necessarily a problem because you could always get your key players into the attacking positions. But I just didn't quite see. Yeah, this German side surprised me. I thought it was interesting to see that Joachim Löw went with a more fluid system. I did think Gnabry would start as a central striker, but I didn't expect them to be hitting so many crosses in. No. If I would say that Kante does have any weakness to him, his Achilles heel is getting playmakers in and around him. Because he's very good at reading, the overall kind of holistic play, but get quick passes in and around him, and he's not great in a rondo, basically. And I thought that's where they'd get that in. And Kimpembe also, he divides opinion. Can be a bit rash, and just that's where I thought it would be. There was a lot of surprising things there. I wondered what Kai Havertz necessarily does in a team from that point of view. And yeah, it was a team that was missing a finisher really, and just had unlike the Spanish squad, there is finishers available. I'm sure you were absolutely, partly tearing your hair out and partly relieved when you saw Kevin Volland come on at left wing back rather than striker, and have no idea why they didn't stick him straight in the box. So yeah, it was interesting to see what happened overall in this game.
Yeah,
but I felt like I didn't see the best version of either side, and to be honest, was quite kind of disappointing from the neutral point of view, because obviously you'd love this game to be, a great game. See all the attacking talent. Maybe it would only be, the 1-0 that it was, but to see it be an own goal, and it was the move that resulted in the own goal was fantastic. As you mentioned, Pogba was superb in that game. But I just didn't feel like it was necessarily a great spectacle generally.
No, I think that's perfectly fair, and I'm 100% sort of happy with result, and result beats performance for me. I think they'll get better. They'll grow into this tournament. At least I hope, anyway. So, yes, okay, good stuff. Well, that was the first stage games. Then, like I said, we're planning to sort of do a pod, albeit, yes, we do know that there's a couple of games going on as we speak, or have been, and second games are underway. But unfortunately, UEFA don't give us the luxury of a day off, as we've mentioned previously. So we're just going to try and sort of cram them in as close to the start of the next group of games goes by as we can. So we will be back after the culmination of everybody playing their second game, and we'll see where that shakes out. Excuse me, a couple of notable fixtures, probably just to kind of keep an eye out for, he says, as he scrolls on to group stage match day 2. And eventually the system wakes up. So we've got Italy-Switzerland, which is tonight, time of recording, so the 16th. Denmark-Belgium is tomorrow. The suggestion is that the Belgian players are going to kick the ball out of play to give Christian Eriksen a round of applause, which is a nice touch. Netherlands-Austria could be 7-7, it could be 0-0, who knows. Sweden play Slovakia on Friday, which might be interesting just because Sweden play ahead of Spain. So they've got an opportunity to get ahead in that group. And, of course, Slovakia already got 3 points under their wing. Friday also sees Croatia, Czech Republic, and, of course, England, Scotland, which I imagine will entertain most of the UK's natives on a Friday evening in the sunshine with lots of beer. What could possibly go wrong in a pandemic? I can't imagine for a minute what could go wrong there.
I will quickly add the forecast is rain.
Oh, is it?
Friday night, yes.
There you go, just in time to...
True British spirit, though.
True British spirit, yeah. If it's sunny during the day, that won't matter a job, but yeah, hopefully we shall see. That's an 8 o'clock kickoff. And then on the Saturday, you've got Hungary, France, Portugal, Germany, which I think most people will be tuning in for at 5 p.m. UK time. And we finish with Spain, Poland, which again could be Spain just playing pretty pictures with the ball around the pitch all game and not scoring. And Lewandowski getting no service, and once again having questions asked of his international record. So, some games to look out for. So we will aim to be back. I would imagine. Are we going to record a podcast on a Sunday? I find that hard to believe, but you never know. We'll certainly be back after those games have been played anyway. So keep it tuned to our feed via the ABW feed, of course. But my thanks to Josh and my thanks to Tom for joining me at rather short notice. So thank you both for your time.
No problem at all.
Thank you for having me again, mate.
More than welcome. And yes, don't worry, we will drag Joel kicking and screaming onto this podcast, particularly if Spain actually get a win. So, and I know
just even a goal. That's all we'll take.
Just anything. Yeah, something to do with Morata.
We'll take a penalty at this point, even if they miss it.
Own goal, however it comes, doesn't matter. So, yeah, good stuff. Okay, well, thank you very much for listening, dear listeners. If you've got any questions or comments or whatnot that you want to drop our way, please do. I do just want to give one very, very quick shout out to scrolls down Twitter timeline. Can't find it. I think it was Vita. I think the chap's name is. He said he was very much looking forward to us break down the tactical side of Spain against. It was Vera Retira on Twitter. Can't wait for the ABW hipster analysis of Sweden, Spain. Vera, I hope we've done you proud. It was not easy. Hopefully we'll have more to talk about in the coming days. But thank you very much for everyone who tunes in and listens and supports the pod. We do appreciate it. And do drop us a line if you've got any questions. But until the end of the second stage games, we've been the Football Hipsters. Keep your ears strong and you guys are trendy. And we'll see you after the second group of games.